So, The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, the epic conclusion to a movie trilogy that disappointed everyone, yet nobody is willing to admit it. I remember how great of an experience it was seeing The Return of the King in the cinema back in 2003. When I heard about the special extended DVD editions that were coming out later, with Return of the King having more than 50 minutes of additional footage included in it compared to the theatrical version, I was excited. I felt like the more I got to experience this world, the better. That's why it's even more baffling to me how much of a reverse effect the Hobbit movies had on me. While watching it, the one thing I kept thinking about was how anxious I will be for it to be released on DVD so that someone will finally have the opportunity to take all three of these movies and edit them down into one, containing what is essential to the core story and throwing out all the unnecessary stuff. This film proved to me yet again that prequels aren't really the best idea for movies. Especially since you have a bunch of characters you absolutely know are not going to die, since they show up later in the story. And then you have a bunch of characters whose names you can't even remember. Seriously, am I the only one who thinks that besides Thorin and Killy and maybe that bearded one, all these other dwarves lack any personality? After 3 movies, the only characteristics I can remember these dwarves by is that this is the fat one, this is the bald one, this is the crazy looking one, this is the blonde one, this is the one with the crazy hairdo, etc. Smaug's defeat happens in the first 5 minutes of the movie. I think Peter Jackson probably thought he was making something like The Empire Strikes Back when he considered ending his second film on a cliffhanger. Oh no, how are they gonna get out of this one? Honestly, having to wait a whole year for your cliffhanger to be resolved in the first few minutes of the next movie doesn't really make you feel like it was worth it. Unfortunately, the rest of the film isn't exactly the big epic defining moment of the saga they are promising it to be. Underwhelming would be my word for it. There doesn't seem to be much at stake here besides the gold in the Lonely Mountain, which suddenly everyone in Middle-earth wants to put their hands on. It all feels like it has been leading up to this small battle for this gold. Which brings us to the action scenes. Am I the only one of the opinion that these scenes don't look that good? The reason why this and this are so much better than these and this is so much more suspenseful than that is because these actually existed in the real world. It wasn't just some CGI crap. Of course, The Lord of the Rings had plenty of big action scenes as well, but we always had main characters we cared about involved in them. Here I don't know any of these people, much less care about them. The dwarves just stand there doing nothing but talking half the time. My other big complaint is that while most of the main characters have arcs, Bilbo doesn't really seem to have one. I really don't feel much of a closure with him. What did he learn from all of this? Frodo and Sam learned a lot during their adventure. They learned about friendship, betrayal, trust, survival. Bilbo does all of these things too. He saves the dwarves a few times, earns their trust, befriends them, but it doesn't really feel like he changes much as a person. Frodo and Sam had to learn all of those things along the way. From the start, Bilbo seems intelligent and brave enough already, and therefore is less relatable of a character because we see him being plunged into this dark and dangerous world and is able to survive without having to go through any major changes like a normal person would. Guillermo del Toro co-wrote the script, who was originally chosen to direct before his departure from the project. It's a shame that it wasn't his original interpretation of the story that was made. Not only would it have had more practical effects, instead of the CGI crap, but more attention would have been given to making creatures look different from one another, and the most significant script change was to Bilbo's characterization. It shifted and changed into someone who, rather than being slightly younger and more innocent in the world, once had a sense of longing for adventure and has lost it and become fussy and fusty, says co-screenwriter Philippa Boyens. And now to the stuff I actually liked about the film. Thorin starts becoming more and more greedy and distrustful towards his fellow dwarves. Dragon fever, they call it in the movie. It's some kind of strange power the gold can have over your mind, similar to the power of the ring. Everyone attempts to shake some sense into him and figure out what's making Thorin behave this way. I wish that subplot was more thoroughly developed. Hell, have the movie be 2 hours of dwarf therapy sessions. I enjoyed the last third of this movie. There is a fight that breaks out between 2 of the main characters. Not only do they have to fight each other, but they also have to be cautious about the ice they just so happen to be on, which is cracking under their feet. That fight scene worked really well. If you're going to give me a fight between 2 characters I care about, I'm going to be much more emotionally invested, because I know these characters, I've seen them in action, I know what they're capable of. And most importantly, it's good if I'm uncertain about whether they are going to make it out alive or not. The way the movie wraps itself up is decent, even if it's not anything mind-blowing. Everything ties in reasonably well with The Lord of the Rings. I would say this film is like having dessert. You already ate most of your meal, yet you still feel like having a piece of cake in order to finish it off and to have that feeling of completeness. That's kind of how the Hobbit trilogy is. You already realize your best moments are behind you, but you still want to taste the ending. I can tell you that it is sweet, but ultimately not that necessary. All in all, this is top-notch filmmaking by Peter Jackson and company. If you're a fan and you've seen the others, you're gonna see this anyway. Man, you should. You're not going to hate it. Nobody's gonna hate this movie. But you know, sometimes you can't help but wonder if it couldn't have been even better.